thanks very much for joining us. I want to talk to you about the terror attacks in Brussels today. If you were president of the United States, what steps would you take right now to prevent these kinds of attacks from happening here in the United States?
Well, I'd immediately strengthen our borders, as I've been talking about for a long period of time, and I would be very, very strong on visas, and I'd be very, very probably end a lot of them, and I'd be very strong, and especially coming from certain parts of the world, which, as you know, I've spoken about, and I've been criticized in some circles for, and I've been praised in other circles for. But this is a problem. Radical Islamic terrorism is a major problem, and we have a president that won't even mention the term, won't mention the words, and he's making a terrible mistake. This is radical Islamic terrorism.
Would you continue to support at least a temporary ban on all Muslims coming into the United States?
Well, you have no choice, and you're going to make certain exceptions, and you're going to make exceptions on heads of state and certain people, and I'm not saying you don't do that, but we have a real problem, and people don't have any idea what's going on. We have a government that's impotent. We have a government that doesn't get it. But we have a real problem, Wolf, and we have a government that doesn't understand what's happening.
You're from New York City, where there are at least three major airports, the most trafficked train station in the country. Should there be added layers? I know security is always high in New York, especially after 9/11, but should there be added levels of security put in place right now? For example, at airport baggage claim centers, train stations, other places.
Yes, there should. And, you know, we have a mayor who's doing a terrible job, and everybody talks about it. He's doing a terrible job in so many ways, de Blasio. He's a disaster as a mayor and probably will be challenged. I can't imagine that he gets away with this, but he knocked out surveillance and so many other things. You know, we had the finest surveillance of the whole radical Islam situation that there is, they say, in the world, the New York City Police Department, which is an amazing department. And he knocked it out. He took it down, and he knocked it out, and that was a terrible mistake.
What if you do have this temporary ban, though, on Muslims coming into the United States? Don't you understand, at least a lot of the law enforcement authorities say, you need the cooperation of Muslims to find the radical Muslims, the jihadists, and without their cooperation, it could potentially get a whole lot worse.
Well, let me tell you a little secret. So the man that was caught the other day, this lowlife that was caught the other day, he was guarded by people that knew, the community knew he was there. Everybody knew he was there. He was seen shopping in grocery stores, and they have pictures of him shopping in grocery stores. His community knew he was there. There are probably many, many people that knew him, and they never turned him in. And that's part of the problem. They don't turn him in. Maybe they're going by Sharia law, which is what they want to start off with. But we have a real problem, Wolf, and unless we solve the problem, we can't continue to be the stupid people. You look at what's going on in Germany, you look at what's going on even in a part of Sweden, where they're having problems like they never thought possible. Sweden never had problems like this, where a group came in and now all of a sudden they have a section. So we can be nice about it, and we can be politically correct about it, but we're being fools, okay? We're being absolute fools. There's something going on, and unless we get to the bottom of it, we're going to have to be very vigilant. We're going to have to be very strong, or we're not going to have a country left either. You look at what's going on in Brussels. You know, Brussels was one of the most beautiful places, okay? And everybody talked about it, and nobody talks about Brussels anymore. In fact, on a lot of the news reports, I guess a few months ago, I talked about how bad Brussels were, and then 6-7 months ago, I talked about how bad Brussels was, and I got a little heat over it, and now they're all saying Trump was right. Brussels is a disaster. They have areas of Brussels, the police won't even go into those areas. They're so dangerous and so radicalized. I'm just saying, we have to be smart and we have to be vigilant.
If you were president, Mr. Trump, what would you do? How would you question Salah Abdeslam, one of the ringleaders of the Paris attacks, who was arrested the other day in Brussels?
Well, that's the man I'm talking about, and he was arrested in an area that everybody knew he was there, but they didn't turn him in. The Muslim community did not turn him in, and they should have turned him in. And right now we have a lot of people, and a lot of people think he may have led this attack. He may have been the one that did the attack, or it was done in retribution. And what I would do is look, I think we have to change our law on you know, the waterboarding thing, where they could chop off heads and they can drown people in cages and heavy steel cages, and we can't waterboard. So we have to change our laws, and we have to be able to fight at least on an almost equal basis. We have laws that we have to obey in terms of torture. They have no laws whatsoever that they have to obey.
So would you start torturing him right away, or would you see if he would cooperate and share information? Because Belgian authorities, Belgian police say he has been talking.
Well, you know, he may be talking, but he'll talk a lot faster with the torture. If he would have talked, you might not have had to blow up all these people dead and all these people horribly wounded, because he probably knew about it. I would be willing to bet that he knew about this bombing that took place today. So we have to be smart. I mean, it's hard to believe. We can't waterboard, which is whether, look, nothing's nice about it, but it's your minimal form of torture. We can't waterboard, and they can chop off heads.
Because they argue, the people who passed the law say waterboarding is torture. And you say you would even go further than waterboarding? Is that right?
Absolutely.
How far would you go?
Well, I'd go further. I'd listen to the military people, but I'd go
further.
The
military people don't want. The military people say they oppose torture.
I disagree.
And it's not part of the U.S. Military Code of Conduct.
I don't believe they do. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I think they're told to say that politically. I think that they believe in it 100%. You talk to General Patton from years ago. You talk to General Douglas MacArthur. I will guarantee you, these were real generals, and I guarantee you they would be laughing. Well, right now they're crying, and right now they're spinning in their graves as they watch this stupidity go on.
Because I just want to interrupt, Mr. Trump. I just want to point out it was the CIA who was engaged in the waterboarding after 9/11. The U.S. military deliberately said they didn't want to have any part of the waterboarding because it wasn't part of their military code of conduct. That's why it was left to civilians working at the CIA with the authorization of the Justice Department, of course, and the Bush administration.
Well, with the authorization, it was probably a political decision, not a real decision. It wasn't probably, in my opinion, it wasn't a military decision. It was a political decision, and it continues to be a political decision. And the problem that we have, Wolf, it's a very big problem. We're fighting by different sets of rules. They're fighting with no rules, no regulations, no anything. They can blow people up in shopping centers. They can have bombs that are so vicious with the nails and the glass and all of the things come spewing out, blinding and destroying people and killing people, and yet we have rules and regulations. We can't waterboard because it's a little bit on the tough side.
Well, they say
we have to get smart, Wolf.
They point out that it's a violation of international law to engage in torture, and the U.S. has signed on to these various international treaties banning torture.
Well, I would say that the eggheads that came up with this international law should turn on their television and watch CNN right now, because I'm looking at scenes on CNN right now as I'm speaking to you that are absolutely atrocious. And I would be willing to bet, when I'm seeing all the bodies laying all over the floor, including young, beautiful children laying dead on the floor, I would say if they watch that, maybe, just maybe, they'll approve waterboarding and other things.
As you know, Ted Cruz suggested today the U.S. should step up its involvement going into Muslim neighborhoods, as he described it, looking for potential terrorists. Is that something you would support?
Yes, I would. I think that's a good idea.
I'm talking about Muslim neighborhoods in the United States, for example.
Yeah, I would support that, yes, 100%.
But how would you do that? How do you find out where Muslim neighborhoods are?
You do it. You do it. Yeah, let me tell you, I bet you the local police know much more than what's going on than anybody would understand. I would be willing to bet that the local police, and that I know it's true with the gangs, I know that if the police were given their hand, they would stop the gang problems in Chicago and various other places. They know the gang members. They know everything. They know things that are going on, and local police know plenty about the Muslims too. But the police have been so hurt and so left out and so discouraged by what's happening, where they lose their jobs, they lose their pensions, they lose everything, that we have a very soft country. We have a very, in many ways, not in certain countries, but in many countries, we have a very soft world. And it's going to get a lot tougher. You watch, because people can't take this. These acts, these horrible, violent acts. Now, the man that was caught, who I'm sure knew about this, and I'm sure if they were strong and strong like I mean strong, I'm sure he would have given them up before this act happened. He knew about this act. This act was an act of retribution because they caught him. A lot of people are saying that. And it probably was. And he probably knew about it. Maybe he planned it. But You know, he's probably right now sitting there with lawyers surrounding him saying, you don't have to talk, don't worry about it. The trial will start in 10 years. In 10 years, everybody will forget.
Mr. Trump, what do you say to the millions of Muslim Americans who are very patriotic, loyal Americans, many of whom have sons and daughters who serve in the U.S. military, who feel they would be discriminated against if these policies went forward?
I say we have a problem. We have a radical Islamic terrorism problem. That's what I say. I have to say that. We have a problem like we've never had before. This is a problem that has gone on. General Pershing had the problem in 1919 in the Philippines with radical Islamic terrorism. And he handled it a certain way. I think you probably know that story. It's a very gruesome story. But you know what? The problem didn't exist for 48 years after that happened. So we have to be a lot tougher than we are. Right now, they look at us as weak, soft, stupid people. Look at the scene on CNN right now, all the bodies all over the floor, and we're worried about waterboarding.
Mr. Trump, I know you got to go, but thanks very much for joining us. We'll continue these conversations down the road.